Our founders designed the system so that we weren't going to use active duty military inside the United States and make American citizens potentially scared of their own military. Donald Trump asked for the active duty 82nd Airborne to be deployed during that same time. Secretary Esper has written that he convinced him against that decision. Would you also convince him otherwise?
How many genders are there? Tough one.
Would you be surprised if there were 1 or 2 defections?
You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother.
We miss him in Michigan. For those who I haven't met in my 1 week that I've been sworn into the Senate, I'm a CIA officer recruited after 9/11. I did 3 tours armed in Iraq alongside the military, and have worked for 4 different secretaries of defense, both Democrat and Republican, proudly, and watched them make decisions that literally determine the life and death of Americans in the dark of night. I'm also a Democrat representing a state that Trump won, right? We both won on the same ballot.
For the dark night?
So I understand that President Trump has the right to nominate his people. We are going to have policies that we disagree with. All of that, to me, comes very standard. What I think I'm most concerned with is that no president has the right to use the uniformed military in a way that violates the U.S. Constitution and further taints the military as that apolitical institution that we all want, right? And our founders designed the system so that we had posse comitatus, that we weren't going to use active duty military inside the United States and make American citizens potentially scared of their own military. We went through our own experience with that with the British. As the Secretary of Defense, you will be the one man standing in the breach should President Trump give an illegal order, right? I'm not saying he will, but if he does, you are going to be the guy that he calls to implement this order. Do you agree that there are some orders that can be given by the Commander-in-Chief that would violate the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, thank you for your service. But I reject the premise that President Trump is going to be giving illegal orders.
No, I'm not saying he will, but do you believe there is such a thing as an illegal order that Joe Biden or any other president, Donald Trump, could give? Is there anything that a Commander-in-Chief could ask you to do with the uniformed military?
This is what a cult looks like. Your allegiance is to the Constitution,
not to a
president. Not to the fucking president.
Anybody of any party could give an order that is against the Constitution or against the law.
Right. Okay. So are you saying that you would stand in the breach and push back if you were given an illegal order?
I start by saying I reject the premise that President Trump will be giving any illegal orders at all.
Mike, this isn't a hypothetical, okay? Your predecessor in a Trump administration, Secretary Esper, was asked and did use uniformed military to clear unarmed protesters. He was given the order to potentially shoot at them. Helos flew low in Washington, D.C. as crowd control. He later apologized publicly for those actions. Was he right or wrong to apologize?
Senator, I was there on the ground.
I understand, and I respect that.
I've been there.
But you're about to be the Secretary of Defense
that was involved in that moment. I also understand legality and the Constitution.
Sir, was he right or wrong to apologize?
So he would do whatever Trump wants.
That's
exactly. That's cool.
Words in the mouth of Secretary Esper or anybody else.
No, he said them himself. You don't have to. What are you scared of? Did he do the right thing by apologizing?
I'm not scared of anything, Senator.
Then say yes or no. You can say no.
The laws and the Constitution in any particular scenario.
Donald Trump asked for the active duty 82nd Airborne to be deployed during that same time. Secretary Esper has written that he convinced him against that decision. If Donald Trump asked you to use the 82nd Airborne in law enforcement roles in Washington, D.C., would you also convince him otherwise?
I'm not going to get ahead of conversations I would have with the president. However, there are laws and processes inside our Constitution that would be followed.
President Trump said in November that he is willing to consider using the
active
duty military against the, quote, enemy within. Have you been personally involved in discussions of using the U.S. military active duty inside the United States?
Senator, I'm glad we finally got to the topic of border security equaling national security because it's been abdicated and ignored for the last 4 years.
That wasn't my question. I'm just asking, have you been involved? You're about to be the Secretary of Defense, potentially. Have you been involved in discussions about using the active duty military inside the United States?
Senator, I am not yet the Secretary of Defense.
Right. I'm
If
just asking.
confirmed, I would be party
That's why
to
she said
any number of
potentially,
But you haven't
dumbass.
been in any of these
which I would not
conversations.
reveal what I have discussed with the President of the United States.
Just
or
have
not.
you been in conversations? You're going to be in charge of 3 million people, the active duty that I know you care about. I believe you care about. So have you been in conversations about using the active duty in any way? Whether it's setting up in detention camps, policing dangerous cities, have you been involved in any of those conversations?
Certainly, I have been involved in conversations relating to doing things this administration has not, which is secure the southern border and not allow floods
Somebody clip
of
that and
illegal
run
people
with it.
into
So are
our
you-
country
so-
through an invasion
Okay.
that threatens the American people.
Okay,
And
okay,
there
I
are
got
ways
it.
in
He
which
said the word
military is
invasion.
always
He said the
given
word
it-
invasion,
yeah,
so he
exactly.
would deploy.
5,000
Yes.
National
Do you
Guardsmen from
believe
Indiana and
that the
Texas.
US
We're at
The same
border
feds
right
that
now
we don't
allowing
trust,
for
by the way,
border
because they
You
Jay
It's
have
different.
black
Yeah,
presidents
Stephen,
Those are
it's
different
Yeah,
feds. Those are different
yeah,
federal
absolutely.
officers. Okay.
New
enforcing
feds.
Detention
our southern
centers.
border.
Our U.S. military is not trained in law enforcement roles. I think you know that, right? We've seen how that mission is difficult for them in places like Iraq and Afghanistan because that's not the training a uniformed military comes with. Do you support the use of active duty military in supporting detention camps?
Senator, everything we will do would be lawful and under the Constitution,
Okay,
but
I'm
I
gonna take that as a
recognize
yes.
that this administration has abdicated its responsibility. President Trump is going to
Okay,
restore
in the
order at the
spirit
border,
of preserving
prevent our
the
enemies from
institution,
invading, and yes, he has said
Sir,
mass
I get your
deportations will
filibustering.
be
I get it.
a part of what
In the
happens.
spirit of preserving the institution that I think we both care about, legitimately, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I've heard a couple of different things. One, you said you will not change the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is what governs justice system in the military. Yes or no? You said that earlier.
Those are
I'm just
laws,
confirming.
Senator, set by Congress.
Okay, so you will not go to change it. You will not attempt to change it. You also said that JAG officers are potentially people who put their own interests in their own medals and promotions ahead of the troops. Senator Lindsey Graham was a JAG officer for most of his life. Is that what you believe about those who implement our justice system in the U.S. military?
Senator, I was speaking
Not
about
that guy.
particular JAG officers I've had to deal with in my military.
I was
Are you gonna get
speaking
involved?
about
Member of
Lindsey
the
Graham
United States.
particularly.
Are you as Secretary
I'm
of
saying
Defense going to get involved in the implementation of the U.S. Military Code of Justice?
Senator, ultimately, it will be a big part of my job to evaluate decisions vis-a-vis
Okay, so
the
I'll take
Uniform
that.
Code of
I'll
Military
take that as
Justice.
yes. Have you seen the,
but fairly.
is CQ Brown on your list in the Warrior Boards to be removed from his position?
Senator, every single senior officer
the
will be
chairman of the Joint
reviewed
Chiefs of
based
Staff.
on meritocracy, standards, lethality,
Loyalty
and
to Trump.
commitment to lawful
Loyalty to
orders
Trump.
they will be given.
He's also black,
Thank
by the
you,
way, so I
Senator
imagine he's a prime
Slotkin. I
candidate
now
for
recognize
being
Senator
fired by this
Shaheen
incoming
for a
administration.
unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Entering a support letter in for Mr. Hegseth.
This is the
submitted
guy
by
who
nearly
replaced,
90 former
John
soldiers who
Tester,
served
Democrat in
with Pete
Montana.
combat.
I'm pretty
I'd like
sure
to
it was
submit a statement
reported
from
he
86 of them who
lied
support his
about or
nomination,
faked an
although they come from
injury that
different
he
units and ranks.
supposedly
The
got in
signatories commend
combat.
Mr.
and
Hegseth
turns
for
out,
his
like,
selfless
he accidentally
leadership,
shot himself.
love of his soldiers,
Fact check
and
me on
commitment
that.
to our country.
Going
Two
from
items.
memory.
Sorry, one item. I ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record.
Without objection, it will be entered.
It's also very
Thank you,
good
Mr. Chairman.
accounting, obviously.
Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
What's your favorite color?
Senator, there are two genders.
I know that well. I'm a she/he, so I'm on board.
He's so funny.
What is the diameter of the rifle round fired out of an M4A1 rifle?
That's a 5.56.
How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning. My
What do you
brother
think
saw
are What do you think our most important strategic base is in the Pacific?
it. In the Pacific, Guam is pretty strategically significant.
How many rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?
Depends on the magazine, but standard
In
issue is
California,
30.
10.
Senator.
And what size round does the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military fire?
A 9mm, Senator.
What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?
Duracell?
So right there, you represent.
Is he signing up to be like infantry? Is that what we're interviewing for right now?
God,
Understand
I
what the warfighter deals with
So
every single day on the
stupid.
battlefield. You understand what happens on the front line, where our troops will be. And what happens, unfortunately, in this
I know
country
what-
is decisions made in
The
rooms
cartridge
like
of an
this
M9 and an M4, that means I'm
Bad
qualified.
decisions
I know what the military goes
end
to.
up
We
in
have
dead
future Defense
17, 18,
Secretary
19-year-old
Bunnell.
Americans.
Yeah,
Those-
I will
those
be going
Americans
over there.
Exactly,
come
behind the
from
microphone.
Families that sit in rooms like this. They come from lower, middle
I'm looking forward to watching
families
that Senate confirmation
who sometimes
here.
the military is your only
I will
way
be
out.
honest, I don't know where Guam is.
And
so I
they
have no
join
fucking
because
idea.
maybe
You know where
they
Guam
want
is?
to go to college.
You got to take
Maybe they
what
know the
you should
choice.
do is
Maybe
make
they
them
love this
take the
country.
same
But
sort
for
of
whatever reason
geography
they
quizzes
joined and
that
they
you do all
sat
the
in
time.
the
True.
Exactly. Be like, you know what? I
And when
challenge you,
people like us
motherfucker,
screw
right
up,
now.
they don't come home. And that's the one thing that I care about. Is you remember when I shut the door when you came with your entourage, Senator Coleman, I've known for a long time, and you and I sat together, asked you one question. You remember what that question was?
Are you going to have the backs of the warfighters?
Exactly. What is going to be your number one priority? And I don't care, frankly, what all these letters and articles say. I've been a part of a smear campaign too, I get it. I care that you're going to have one thing in mind when you sit in that chair in that 5-sided building, and you told me what that was. So with that, you have my support. I'm sorry you have to go through a process like this, but it is one of the most important jobs in the world. We got to make sure you're ready for it. I thank you for your answers. I got one final question that's very important to me. This is more of a technical question, but I think it's to fix the Army in this country is a 1 or 2 year problem. We can make bullets, we can make rifles. Fix the Air Force might be a 5-year problem. To fix our Navy is a decades-long pursuit. How are you going to fix our national? You don't have all the power. We're not China. Unfortunately, you can't snap your fingers. But how are you going to lead an initiative within the DoD to reinvigorate our national shipbuilding industry so we are able to compete with China? Because freedom of navigation is critical to our economy and the global economy. It's going to be a very important task for you to complete.
It's a critical question, Senator, and that's why I'm grateful that President Trump has said definitively to me and publicly that shipbuilding will be one of his absolute top priorities of this administration. So a lot of it does go into pulling things up into the OSD's office, Secretary of Defense's office, to shine a spotlight
That sure sounds like they're
going
going to be expanding
the bureaucracy
Pentagon
doesn't
budget.
strangle.
I've been assured.
Of course they will. They've already said that.
Well, no, but I've been assured by right-wing populists and by other populists who are sympathetic to this that they will be cutting
some of it is on the east, some of
Pentagon
it's on the
budget.
west, some of it's on the Great Lakes. The workforce problems that our shipyards are facing are significant, and there's been a big investment from this committee, I know, in a lot of those places because of the shortfalls, manpower issues, everything else. But we also see adversaries that have been able to innovate themselves in ways that their shipbuilding capacity is, I won't reveal it at this hearing, multitudes and multitudes beyond our capabilities. So it needs to be a rapid investment, a rapid fielding, and then we need to incentivize outside entities to fill the gap. We've talked a lot about UAVs. UAVs are very important, but there's also a future of UUVs, unmanned underwater vehicles, that will be a part of amplifying the impact of our Navy, because this administration has allowed our number of ships to drop below 300. It sets a projection of 340 or 350, but doesn't create the capacity to actually address it. And so if we're going to defend our interests, our allies, and put America first, we're going to have to be able to project power. That it means shipbuilding. It means historic investments in our defense industrial base there. And then also driving innovation and cost savings in ways that only business leaders inside the Pentagon can do.
When I'd add, I don't think any board in the
Military
world would hire
industrial complex,
Steve
by the
Jobs
way.
or
Business
Elon
leaders.
Musk.
Okay. Have you heard me give this complaint? I forgot. It used to be you had your intellectual vanguards of Republican media, your Rush Limbaughs, your Michael Savages, your Bill O'Reillys. These are people who be like scary debaters. They're going to be able to go in a bit more on the topics and whatever is like part of the conservative zeitgeist at the time. But now you just have it's just all like talking points. Like the media people are just doing talking points. It's the same as talking to a frontline, whatever, random fucking party person. So I Googled that DEI thing because I was curious. And of course, the first link that pops up is just a Fox News thing. Because I was curious about that. And I even had an inkling. I couldn't say because we were watching it, but like when they said no mom and dad, that you couldn't say mom and dad anymore, my initial guess, oh, now I'm spoiling because I've already seen it, but my initial guess was that it was probably more don't tell troops like say hi to mom and dad or whatever, but rather you just say like your parents or whatever, because some people might have a dead parent or some shit like that. And I looked it up and that's exactly what it was. Nothing in here is about not being allowed to say mom and dad anymore. It was just like suggestions to be more inclusive to your troops, rather than like saying like write mom and dad. You would say like write your parents or write your guardians. It sounds like he said you couldn't even say parents anymore, but so they suggest maybe parents, caregivers, or guardians instead of mom and dad. Now, whether you think that's cringe or not, that's fine. But like, if you already think it's bad, why lie more about it?
Right. And well, see, for me, it's like, even granting the premise that there are some cringe parts of, inclusivity programs, which I think pretty much everybody agrees. Like, Robin, I don't know if like even like progressives or leftists like that, like in our space that defend like, is it Robin DiAngelo or whatever, the lady who gives all the seminars about like DEI and inclusivity for corporations. Like, I think most people agree that there's part of these things that you could interpret as cringe or whatever. So let's just grant the premise, because it's you and me.
Also, anybody that's worked a normal job before, did you ever have to do where you'd sit in a room with the VHS and you'd have to watch the training? We did this at my McDonald's. You had to watch the training over like how to treat employees and not sexually harass people. Like,
right, like there's this sort of like these obligatory things which appear even in the private sector, which come off like ridiculous, and like even set aside like workplace conduct, like even just general meetings, like when you hear your CEO talk about we're a family, like that shit's sort of cringy. This virtue signaling. But here's the point. Let's just grant the premise. What have they actually shown in terms of the Biden administration's DOD is lacking in military preparedness or military readiness relative to what they inherited, or relative to, like, he talked about, there was a claim about military recruitments post-election. Well, maybe that's true. Is that like a recurring thing? Like, do we see that in previous elections? Like, is it like, do we see like recruiting seasons?
Was this after the Biden election too?
Right. Well, no, he said with the Trump election, right? That's what I'm saying. Okay. Like, for all we know, it's like a cyclical thing. And to me, it's like they appeal to these things, but they don't point to specific. Like, the closest they get is Afghanistan. The closest they get is Afghanistan. They're like, look how we slunk away in shame in Afghanistan. But it's like, actually, given the context of Afghanistan, what was accomplished there was actually really impressive.
We also, I know we don't care, but we did have like a whole ass inspector general special report that, like, why was everything like so crazy pulling out? And it was because the deal was fucking insane.
Yes.
And it was because Donald Trump drew the troop levels down to an insane low, the lowest that they had been. And everything was just like fucked and set up to fail because the Afghanistan army wasn't even included in the surrender talks. They didn't even know what the was being given when the Taliban started to come through. Yeah,
it's a trick. So like with all the stuff that I cover on my channel, it's like really like sometimes I have to go back and brush up on certain things because it's like you can only just like retain so much information, and then like a month or two later you forget about it. But the Afghanistan withdrawal is like one of those things that's indelibly seared into my brain because it was when I first started to do like political commentary on TikTok, and it was when President Biden's above water approval rating started to dip. And so like a lot of the stuff I recall, and it was Trump who reduced troop levels from like 13,500 down to 2,500. And they talk about, well, had Trump gotten a second term, it would have been a conditions-based withdrawal. But he didn't enforce any of the conditions. He accepted. The Taliban gave him a list of shit, and Trump honored
like releasing prisoners and shit, right?
Right. Yeah. He arranged for 5,000 Taliban fighters to be sent back to the Taliban. He forced the Afghan government to surrender them. So think about that. He gave the Taliban back twice as many troops as he left in Afghanistan to secure a country which is the size of multiple U.S. states. And like the other thing you hear is like, what about all the equipment? Well, that equipment, I mean, we actually rendered inoperable the vast majority of the equipment that we couldn't take with us. But you're talking about decades worth of equipment that was sold to or loaned
to the Afghan government. Army? Were you going to just take it all from them?
Right. Were you just going to go through the whole fucking country and start collecting like, handguns and shit like that? Yeah.
We need this back now.
Right. And if you were going to do that, why didn't you start to do that on your watch? And why would you reduce the number of troops who would be responsible for doing that in the first place? It's just the whole thing is
the fact that you would negotiate a surrender and then make the withdrawal happen next term is just the ultimate cowardly thing
right, and that's how you know they're full of
shit.
Remember, because he campaigned on that, Stephen. He was like, I'm going to get us out of Afghanistan. But he kicked the can down the road. And so, again, if you want to, I don't want to say the word quibble, but like if you want to complain about aspects of the withdrawal, because even the report concluded, like the withdrawal wasn't perfect. But the other thing is like there were decisions made by the Biden administration. You're the you're the debate king here. Like the difference between like, is it valid and sound? Like there were some decisions that the Biden administration made which were sound in theory, even if in hindsight it turns out, oh, we should have done something else. Like Bagram Air Base is a good example. They're like, oh, you shouldn't have evacuated from Bagram Air Base because it was a fortified structure, but it was like half an hour away from the major population center. Its ability to load planes was half as much as the Kabul airport. So what I'm saying is they had a good reason, even if it turned out to be the wrong reason in hindsight.
Well, there was also the issue of like nobody expected. There were not high hopes for the Afghanistan military, but nobody expected to be that quick.
No.
But because the Afghanistan army wasn't involved when Trump surrendered to the Taliban, there were like the early reports of the Taliban pushing through Afghanistan was literally them walking into an area and then saying, this area was actually promised to us by the United States. And the Afghanistan military actually didn't know. So some people just like dropped their guns and ran, or were just like, oh, well, this. Like that it was just it was a disaster in every sense of the word.
I'm now remembering this when you didn't, who was it who told
Gorka?
you? No, but who was it? Was it Gorka who said, well, the number of troops didn't matter because we also had like Blackwater. We had like...
Oh, that was AJW Sean.
Okay,
He got like, I think, a college degree in misinformation because he happens to be able to read. Like I would consider him evil. He's a person who's read enough to like his statements are intentionally crafted to be deceitful or misleading. I got him really fucking good in that debate too, and I was happy for it. I don't remember what exactly the point was, but it had something to do with like it was like spending in a state or whatever. And I think he was trying to. I started reading off like, oh shit, they do spend the most on some bullshit that he was claiming. And then after he agreed with all the things that I read,
then
he was like, oh yeah,
hit him with the gotcha,
yeah. I was like, actually, this is like third or fourth on the line item. The first or second is shit that's way outside.
Bulk of this federal welfare spending, supposedly, that's going to the state of Kentucky goes to exorbitantly large military bases. Again, I'm not sure like what is so hard to understand about this.
Yeah, I'll look up this, but I did look up what Sean said, and I can see that the federal funds that were spent in Kentucky, 3 is the Department of Agriculture at $2 billion, 2 is the Department of Veteran Affairs at $2.5 billion, and then 1 is the Department of Defense at $8.3 billion. So
I'm out of here.
I'm just kidding, actually. Department of Defense was number 3 at $8.3 billion, 2 was the Social Security Administration at $19 billion, and 1 was the Department of Health and Human Services at $116 billion.
No, and I think you also got him with the, he tried to sell you a line of bullshit. Like it doesn't matter if there are only 25,000 or 2,500 active duty U.S. troops. We had a bunch of military, like.
Oh, he was saying
like
that all the
mercenaries.
contractors there were like top secret, like private military corporation, Metal Gear Solid 4, Black. Yeah, no, they weren't. That was not true.
You think that at any point in fighting in any Middle Eastern war, we have more private military troops on the ground than actual U.S. military troops fighting, not like people that are doing construction, not people that are cooking in kitchens.
Yes.
But economic policy is a bit harder.
I'm sorry. Shut your face. There were 17,000 of these contractors as of April in the year that we drew out. The Biden administration dropped them to 7,800. Closer to the withdrawal, they were dropped down to 2,700. This would be more than
contractors, I'm saying fighting force.
This would be more than now you're changing the parameters.
I didn't change it. I explicitly said fighting force. And I said not people that are like there for construction, not people that are for cooks or chefs, because as you said before, but those aren't our fighting forces.
I'm not talking about chefs or construction workers. In your face.
I literally found the article that you're reading from, and the article itself is backing my point. The cuts are especially acute for private security contractors and for logisticians and mechanics. These are not fighting private military contractors.
The mechanics are I just said that. The mechanic. I knew you were going to say that. I just said, I know you're going to spaz out when I say mechanics. Here's a direct quote from the article.
It does suggest the U.S. is not substituting for troops with money for contractors, which is a claim you just made.
So it's sad because obviously we missed the bulk the bulk of that conversation due to
I'm sure the beginning was
issues.
bullshit as well.
But he's going to be confirmed.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Do you expect that there will be? Okay. Would you be surprised if there were 1 or 2 defections and he just squeaks by? Because again, if he loses 3, he's done. But if it turns out like 2 Republicans, 1 or 2 Republicans vote against him, would that surprise you?
It would have to be people who can survive Trump's pressure. Like,
you have to be Susan Collins from Maine because she's a Republican senator in a blue state.
Okay.
And then probably somebody like in North Carolina, like Tom Tillis or somebody like that, who represents a purple state. I don't know. Like to me, the Joni Ernst, who again, female veteran, she came out and criticized Hegseth. They put a pressure campaign on her, and she folded in like 48 hours.
Romney was a big opposition.
Yeah, but he's out.
He's out now. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, Romney retired. He's out. He pieced out.
John Curtis is his successor.
Oh, hey, I'll say this. Curtis did an interview where he said some pretty encouraging shit, not about Hegseth, but about like, we're not going to be a rubber stamp for Trump. But I mean, it's easy to say that now when you're a freshman senator.
Yeah.
See what the pressure goes. Yeah, as bad as Hegseth is, well, let me ask you, based on what we saw, what did you think? Honest thoughts of Hegseth? Do you think he did better than you thought he would, or worse, or about the same?
I think just for people to understand, the purpose of these public hearings is, at this point, you're trying to enter stuff into the public record more than anything else. So when it comes to Congress, people don't really show up to vote, and you're like, what? Except in exceptional circumstances, like
John McCain
and Trump.
That's right.
Generally, you already know how all the votes are going to go. You've got your party whips. You've got people that talk beforehand, like, are you voting yea or nay? Like, you generally know how it's going to go beforehand. You're not here to be surprised. What you're here to do is to basically, it sounds so stupid, but you're farming clips, basically.
You're virtue signaling.
Yeah, well, yeah, but more specifically, you're farming clips.
Yeah.
You want to have your moment where you're reading off your stats and making the other guy look bad, or you want to have your moment where you're teeing them up for a good answer. Like, tell me, on a scale from 1 to 10, do you love your wife a 9 or a 10? And he's like, I love my wife an 11. And it's like,
Yeah.
my God, that's
He's
so
just
beautiful,
weeping
right?
there. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just, so you're either teeing them up to hit home runs that you can then clip and then put on YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels for your, congressional fan base, or you're trying to team up for big L's that you can put on X or whatever for your fan base. That's basically what these are. Yeah, it's clip farming. He's almost certainly going to be confirmed. I don't think I've heard any talk of it not surviving the confirmation. In terms of how it went,
again, based on what we saw, because I'm sure there was a lot of cool shit that we missed, because towards the end, you're starting to get to the least senior members of the Senate. So like we missed like the badasses, like we just caught the tail end of Elizabeth Warren and stuff like that, like the people who'd really go for the jugular. But yeah, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, the issue is that you're as we move like away from a policy-driven world and a more ideologically driven one, we're getting to more and more dangerous areas where we're just choosing people who have like the most base position on DEI. And the question is how robust are the institutions that they can survive without clear direction or leadership from the top, besides like no DEI or no wokeness. The funny thing is that like there are huge competitive forces here. Like in one way, you could argue that Hegseth is going to be doing things to the military that the average conservative would want to see because he's so ideologically partisan and aligned with them. But in another way, it might actually be even worse for their agenda because he's so, it's not fair to say necessarily incompetent, but like the DOD is huge.
It is, yeah.
Like, yeah, this is tons of people, trillions of dollars of like money and budget. Like the idea that this guy is going to be able to knowingly navigate that environment and implement some type of strict like big culture change.
Is that why, like before, I think it might have been before we were having these tech issues, where you were talking about that you almost see his nomination as a sign that Trump is literally just looking basically for an airheaded pretty boy, and there's going to be more direct control of these departments out of the White House instead of
but Trump doesn't know how any of it works either. So
yeah, but I mean, he's surrounding himself. But I agree. Mm-hmm. Like I guess because
the problem is that the people with the expertise and the know-how to run these institutions are just not this insane. You can't be and be competent at these jobs. So it's hard for them to, like anybody that you pick, even the people who are, like Bill Barr is the best example. This guy was a Trump sycophant and a executive office presidential power sycophant, and even he was like, this is too far for me. Like 3 weeks before the transition, I'm out. So
yeah, I just think that I think you probably, whether you realize it or not, I think you hit the nail on the head, because there was there's been credible reports that the overall ethos for Trump term 2 is that he's going to have more of an overt control from the White House. So like, again, typically speaking, like apparently over the years there's been tension between the executive office of the president and the cabinet secretaries, because like, let's use an example like the chief of staff to get like really nerdy. That's considered the second most powerful person in the federal government. But technically, cabinet secretaries don't report to the chief of staff. It's just the sort of dynamic that the president wants. And I could see in this next administration, Trump is really gonna, run more shit out of the White House as opposed to like really putting competent people as cabinet secretaries. Marco Rubio is like, to me, like some people will cite him and they'll say, this is a guy who's an experienced neocon, an experienced diplomat, that's proof that Trump is taking it seriously. I just don't think that Marco Rubio has the sort of strength of character to really defy Trump. I think that if Marco Rubio, who has a neocon philosophy, if he and Trump come in like conflict, I don't know if he'll do what Bill Barr did. Marco Rubio seems to me like he's the sort of guy who would fold to
You
Trump.
really think so?
Yeah, I think so.
I would hope not, but
Oh, I'd hope not either, but look what he did after the election. I mean, that's the
he
thing.
said he's talked big, but like, would he really? I don't know. It's a spooky world, especially knowing now that the president can do basically whatever he wants to as well, with no criminal oversight either. So
That's why I say Kash Patel is probably the one. You agree? Kash Patel scares you even more than Tulsi, right?
I mean, you've got the FBI and your foreign kind of intelligence. I think the CIA reports to the DNI, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, that's okay. That's a good question right there. You are obligated to confirm one. Do you confirm Tulsi Gabbard as DNI or Kash Patel as FBI director? You have to. I think I'd rather have Tulsi Gabbard as DNI than Kash Patel as FBI director. Jesus. I don't know if I'm missing something. They both suck, but
I feel like I would rather have Kash Patel, but the reason why is because we can deal maybe with like bad Americans, but it's a lot harder to deal with bad foreign adversaries that gain a lot of access to our government. Like Tulsi Gabbard is probably an unprecedented amount of access to stuff related to our government from foreign adversaries who can do who knows what with it. The worst that Kash Patel can do is whatever authoritarian bullshit Trump wants to do, but at least it's still like vaguely American. It's not good, but this would be like a close. Yeah, this would be like a close one. Like I could go either way. Maybe there are a few more children's books out there he's written that I'm not aware of.
He's probably
maybe.
sketching one out right now.
I think the FBI probably has a little bit more in terms of oversight as well and like checks on it than like the CIA, which can.
I don't know, man. J. Edgar Hoover, baby. Like he's kind of like Hoover was like the archetypical example of a rogue FBI director. As a matter of fact, that's part of the reason why, so many reforms were changed about the FBI director. Like they serve 10-year terms instead of like 4-year terms or at the president's pleasure. And I don't know. I just feel like, it's like anything else. These safeguards only matter in so much as people enforce them. Christopher Wray, the current FBI director, is kind of an example of this. He was appointed by Trump. Trump now hates him, and he is resigning. Like, what he should do, in my opinion, is just make Trump fire him. Like, just actually go through it, just to set the standard. Instead, he's like doing this, like, what do they call it? Capitulation in advance or surrender in advance sort
Obeying
of thing.
in advance, yeah. I saw that.
That's it.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know what to say. It's pretty not cool. Not
cool.
great.
Not great.
October 2017.
Oh, we got it.
We go.
At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
Can you?
I believe so.
Never mind.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged.
Jesus.
Fully investigated and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime? That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared? How is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
it was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything...
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
how do you explain your judgment?
Completely false charges against me.
You
fully investigated, and I was completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So
Just
you
talking
can't,
about a hypothetical.
so you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
And
you
it was
cheat, but
fully
you acknowledge
investigated.
that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to
But
be.
no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath, like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator,
Oh, no.
not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if
Oh,
there
no.
were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
Your attorney
those
used
false
the phrase,
claims, I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us, and I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO of Veterans
That's a
America
yes.
and
Those
executive
two.
director
Oh,
of
no.
Freedom.
Were you fired from either
And I
of
was
them?
never fired from a
Do you have
veterans organization.
Do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
What
Many
does
of
that
your
mean?
work
Not that I'm
colleagues have
aware
said
of.
that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
They're not
of
they're not anonymous.
the letters
We've
on the
seen-
record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record, people
We've
who've
seen
worked
records
me
with
at
names
Vets
attached
for
to
Freedom,
them.
Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News
One of
attributing
your-
to me
one of your
being
colleagues
working
said-
hard every day on behalf of
One of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you denied these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous. And I'll just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother. So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career that have talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman, I think
attitudes,
he's
words,
over
and
his time.
statements
He's way
to women.
over his time.
I now yield.
And thank you very much. I now ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a family court order concerning the appointment of parenting time between Mr. Hegseth and Mrs.
Oh my
Samantha
God.
Hegseth. It states that there were no claims of domestic abuse or probable evidence of abuse in the relationship. Without
There was
objection,
Can we
just-
enter into the
will be
record his
added
kindergarten report
to
card that
the
showed that he
record.
was the best
And we
crayon drawer in the whole
now,
class and only ever drew sunshines and rainbows?
move
Chat, who
to,
actually, like, if you
Senator
guys
Kramer.
saw this whole
Thank you,
thing, I'm
Mr.
curious,
Mr.
did
Chairman,
anybody
thank
ever
you,
enter into the
Mr.
record
Hegseth, for your
the
service, for your
email,
willingness
again, from his
to
own
endure
mother
this, and
to
I'm
him,
sorry,
calling him an abuser
for
of
what has
women?
been happening
I'm
to you,
curious if that was entered
particularly
into the
very
record
idea
formally.
that you should have to sit there and answer hypothetical potential in somebody's imagination crimes that may take place at some point, and wouldn't that disqualify you if you were a murderer or if you were unfair?
That's the whole point of these hearings, is to know where they stand on
this
things.
behavior. But first, I want to say thank you for your strong.
Is there a way, one more, can we fast forward to Warren's?
Unapologetic
Oh, yeah, can we find
proclamation of
Elizabeth
faith in
Warren?
Jesus Christ. I sat here and listened to your opening statement and thought, wow, this is a guy who in today's culture is willing to stand up and say the first thing.
I can't believe he hit him with a yo mama. That's brutal. There's no coming back from that.
That's true. Yo mama's on this.
Exactly.
Is she
We
anonymous?
got it right here.
Oof.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Hegseth, thank you. Thank you for your service. So if you're confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve on active duty in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to meet or to answer any of my questions, so we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono, and I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course, we've talked about it in 2024. You published a book, and you say on page 26 of your book, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48 of your book, you claim that women should not be in combat roles, because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks ago, you appeared on the Sean Ryan show and said, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. Now, I presume you recall making all these statements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the article you're pointing to in 2013, but it underscores my argument
I've got the
completely, because
video.
in that 2013 argument, I was talking about standards. Standards are what it's always been about,
Let's not
Senator.
have this same fight again.
Always been about Senate
I've
standards.
quoted
He's not
you
familiar with the
directly.
article,
We've got
but he
the
remembers
video.
the argument.
We're
and
happy to
that's
show it.
interesting.
But I want to be clear here. For 12 years, you were quite open about your views, and your views were consistently the same. Women are inferior soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And in case anyone missed the point, and these are your words from 10 weeks ago, women absolutely
we watched this,
straight
right?
up should not be permitted to
I
serve
wasn't.
in combat.
You weren't here? Oh,
And
you weren't here
I notice
yet.
on
Okay,
each of
gotcha.
these
You were
quotes,
outside.
those are said without qualification. It's not by how much you can lift or how fast you can run. They don't belong in combat, period, or your words, straight up. And then on November 9th, 2024, just 32 days after your last public comment saying that women absolutely should not be in combat, you declared that, quote, some of our greatest warriors are women, and you support having them serve in combat. Now, that is a very, very big about face in a very, very short period of time. So help me understand, Mr. Hegseth, what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding 12 years?
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013 because for me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards? That they should be there if they can carry, if they can run? I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, what changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing?
Senator, the concerns I have and the concerns that many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more difficult
Let me make a
for everybody
suggestion
involved.
about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave
I
this
heard
job,
this part.
you
This is
will
the
not
part I
work for
came
the
in on.
defense industry for 10 years?
Because he won't commit to it.
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about because
You can
it's
think
not
about it
one
right
that-
now.
It's not one. My motivation for this job
I understand
has never
that. I
been
just
about
need
what
a
could
yes or no
conceivably
here.
come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be
In
at the Defense
other
Department.
words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years, but you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
Again,
I don't know if they're laughing with him or I can't tell.
they should be laughing at him.
Yeah, of course.
So you're saying
You're not being nominated for
sauce
general,
the
but this
goose,
is a
but
top-down
sauce
policy you
not
want.
sauce
It's a
for the
distinction
gander?
without a difference.
I would want to see what the policy of the
Oh,
president
I'll
is.
bet you would.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
this
and thank you
dumbass.
for your
Okay,
hard work
you
and
can
your
stop
committees.
this.
All right, yeah, okay,
This
we're good.
asshole
All right.
again.
Mr. Chairman, this is going well.
It's going well. I used to coach football.
Any final thoughts for us? What do you think is the next? Wait, how many of these confirmation hearings have happened so far?
This is the first one.
This is the first. Okay, gotcha. Because I was going to say, I don't think I would miss. Like if Rubio or somebody had gone up, I would have seen clips.
No,
from it,
I mean Rubio's going to go off without a hitch. I mean,
it'll be standard for sure.
Listen, I think a lot of people said if I think it was who'd I talk to? Dan Goldman, Congressman Dan Goldman. He said, which he's not going to be part of the confirmation process because that was the Senate. But he said, listen, I disagree with Marco Rubio's policies, but there's no doubt he's a qualified nominee, which he is. I mean, just objectively speaking, that's going to be easy peasy. Kash Patel is really the one, again, even more so than Tulsi Gabbard. Kash Patel is the one where I'm really looking forward to seeing.
Those two are going to be crazy. Are there still any talks about either of these two not making it, or?
The most recent reports I read said that the scuttlebutt is that all of Trump's nominees, all of them, have the votes.
Has anybody had to step down besides Gates?
Nope. Wait.
I feel like there's one other person.
Marco Rubio was the first one announced. Matt Gaetz is AG. He had to step down. Scott Bessent is Treasury Secretary. That was the one and only. I think it's just Matt Gaetz. Yeah.
Well, what a world.
Yeah. So my final thoughts are, again, we got to take this stuff very seriously in the next couple of years. That's why it's good to see, Stephen interviewing probabilistically the next DNC chair he's probably going to be talking to that person by the end of all these interviews.
It's chill. All right, by the end of all of them, you're right. Okay.
Yeah, by the end of all. That's what I'm saying.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It could be anybody.
Yeah. Oh, no, of course. Yeah.
I might throw my hat into the ring.
You should do that. That'd be fun.
What are they, like 2,000 signatures or something? I don't know. I actually don't know.
TGG could get that for you overnight.
Oh no, you need like 40 signatures, I think, from current DNC members. There's got to be some.
You might get one.
What?
You might get one.
Only one? You don't think I could have 40 signatures from the 448?
Hassan was at the DNC.
You know what? I will run for the next one just to spite you.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to spite you.
I want to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you to keep doing better. He's going to be the next DNC chair. But yeah, we got to take this stuff seriously because we're on the back foot, folks. Institutionally, the right has captured it, and probably to heretofore unprecedented levels. And we got a big hole to dig out of. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Thanks for joining us today, Pondering Politics.
Yeah, I think I'll be...
Also known as RUM 1 and 8.
Yeah, I think I might be back at the end of your Wickler conversation to chat with you.
Oh, okay.
I think, maybe.
You're not, you probably don't want to say on your flight list, but okay. Well, if you're here.
Here's the flight number and everything. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, if not, it was good chatting with you, despite the audio and technical issues, and I'm sure we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, and we have 2 years for Trump and his guys to run amok, and then we've got midterms coming up. And I'm sure we're going to just blow them away. What does the map look like for those? Do we know?
It's a fairly favorable map as far as the House goes. The Senate, I feel like it's constantly one step forward, 2 steps back. Like Republicans have the potential, like if they maximize their potential as far as Senate maps, they can get a filibuster-proof majority.
You know what I like?
It's extremely difficult. Like the only way we could ever match that is if we win red states.
Sure.
Basically, if they win all red and purple states, they get a filibuster-proof majority. If we win all blue and purple states, we don't get a filibuster-proof majority. We have to win some red states too.
There is a New York Senator, James, I think it was the first name, James Skoufis. One thing that he said that I think this is like a long-term 2 or 3 or 4 elections down the road, but I feel like Democrats should start investing some time and effort into trying to go after some of these like unwinnable red states. Yeah. I feel like there's too much that's just been given up. Especially I feel like there's been an opportunity created by the fact that I feel like the Republicans have shifted like very dramatically in 8 years from their prior policy positions. So if things go poorly over the next 2 years, people are going to be looking around, scratching their heads, wondering what's going on, and having some kind of landing pad there, I think would be good to really aggressively fight across a lot of states. It's places where Republicans aren't used to fighting. Yeah.
Listen, because when you come back after this, like it's going to go straight to Ben Wickler, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then before we cut for break, I'm curious. One of the things that I noticed you've been talking to, like the other DNC candidate chairs, and I'm happy you've been doing this, is about I don't want to use the word ruthlessness, but like you've been really emphasizing what their media strategy is going to be and how you think Democrats should play the game of politics. Is that, because I'm sure some of the questions like you've asked each candidate have have been iterative or whatever, and you've moved. Is that still like high priorities for you? Like as far as
Media
things you
strategy
wanna
is still
know?
the number one thing for me. I think it's the most important thing. Yeah, maybe not necessarily for the DNC chair, but it's something everybody has to keep in mind because the
I think they play a
environment
big
right now
role
is
in that.
unwinnable. Yeah,
I think they play. I mean, obviously they have less influence over how once the candidates are seated, once they win the elections are seated, how they govern. The DNC chair probably has less influence over that, even though I think it's important. But definitely the media strategy. So I do hope precasting or wish casting or whatever. I do hope that that's a big topic of the conversation with Ben Wickler, because he's again, he's probably the favorite right now. Any of them can win. They all have a lot of support. I think David Hogg just got the endorsement of Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. So like people are breaking in various directions. But that's one thing I'm going to definitely be listening for is how the next DNC chair talks about the media strategy, because I'm sure you agree we just like coughed up the fucking ball, like we just gave it to them
on every level. Yeah.
So cool.
Thank you for joining me, and we will chat again in a few days, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love you. Be careful.